Siyata Dishmaya, we are continuing our wondrous lesson of Rabbi Nachman, Likutey Moharan, Torah Yud Gimel. Rabbi Nachman has so far built up this premise, that is that there's always a Tzadik who is trying for the right reasons to learn Torah, and that right reason is to connect to Hashem. And there's always another Tzadik, what we'll call a Talmid Chacham, somebody who is brilliant in exposition of the oral Torah, someone who is well versed in the laws of halachot, and yet his learning is not l'shem shamayim. He's not learning for the sake of actualizing his teachings in practice. He's not learning for the sake of getting closer to Hashem. He's not learning for the sake of bringing others closer to Hashem. He's learning for himself. These two figures, these two paradigms are alluded to by Yaakov and Lavan. Now Rabbi Nachman says that this Talmid Chacham Shed Yehudi, this Jewish scholar demon, the person like Lavan who is expert in the oral Torah and in Jewish law, and yet he's learning for himself alone, he ends up acquiring this thing that's called armimiut, cunning. Shenichnas bo, it enters into him. Now, this is an important concept to know, just in general, in Chassidut and Kabbalah. There is no quality which in and of itself is a negative quality. Everything in the world and everything within the human psyche can be utilized either for positive, constructive use, or it can be utilized for negative, destructive use. For example, love. Love is usually looked at as only a positive quality. And in the secular world, we put the banner of love up all the time. However, love can also be utilized in a negative way. We know, let's say, for instance, there are families that their parents survived the Holocaust. But because they lost so much in the camps, they're scared of ever losing anything again. So now when they move to Israel, they move to America, and they raise children, many times they hear of the experience from the outside that these parents don't separate from their kids. They don't cultivate an independent existence for their children, and instead they're always linked up with them, hip by hip, even when they're not physically together. You know, everybody knows kids that have parents like this, that they're in their hip pocket all the time. And the parents will explain this as an expression of their love. And it's true. It's coming from love. However, Chassidut and Kabbalah and the Torah teaches that anything without boundaries is damaging, even love. Because love without limits, the Torah actually calls rape. All right, and now obviously you can imagine the what is the practical application of this outside of the basic understanding of what rape is. Rape is when you coerce a person to do something against their will. You remove their identity because of your desire, which is so strong. But rape is not only sexual. According to the Torah, according to Chassidut, any act of coercion is a bechina of unbounded love which has no limits, which has no healthy boundaries, even to the extent that we just spoke about before, that a parent, for the sake of his love, but really it's mixed up as well with past traumas, it's mixed up with miseducation. That is to say that if I really love my kid, I'm going to give them everything without limit. I'm never going to allow them to cultivate their own independent existence because I want them to always know I'm going to be there and I love them. And even though seemingly this is a very noble enterprise, but the real truth is, and this takes a lot of learning, this takes a lot of siyata dishmaya, this takes a lot of assistance from above to come to this clarity, that is that love without boundaries is actually very damaging. And so too here, we're saying cunning, which Lavan acquires, Yaakov also acquires. This is why when Yaakov saw Rachel, and Rachel was saying, my father is Lavan, so Yaakov responded, according to the Midrashim, that even though my mother is Rivka, and therefore I get my tamimus, my sincerity, my genuinity from her, my lack of sophistication, my authenticity from my mother, but I'm also the nephew of Lavan, your father. That is to say, Rashi explains, in cunning. Okay? Now, what does Yaakov use this cunning for? He doesn't use it with other people. He uses it with his own inner enemies. The whole positive application of seemingly negative qualities like cunning or sophistication or deception, the Torah, like we just said before, there has to be a positive place for it, because everything could theoretically be positive if used for Hashem. So in this case, where do I use cunning? Not with others, with my inner enemies, with those things that are trying to derail me from the inside, right? Let's say, for instance, I struggle, let's say, with wasting seed. And every single time that I try and directly confront this enemy, I end up degressing, right? I end up devolving. I don't end up progressing. I go backwards, not forwards. And what's the reason? Because Chazal teach in Masechet Brachot that the only way to overcome the Yetzer Hara, the force of negativity within a person, is that it needs to be cunning with it, not with others. Okay? And this is a very, very important point. And this is one of the most fundamental aspects of the Torah, is to teach you when and where. Like Shlomo Melech says, there's a time for this and there's a time for that. There's a time for here, there's a time for now, there's a time for later. There's a time to be happy, there's a time to mourn, there's a time to laugh, there's a time to be serious and somber. There's a time for everything. None of these things are barriers to a good life. These are all the healthy boundaries necessary for living a truly peaceful, whole, good life. However, you need to know when and where, how to apply these things. So usually, this is just a basic klal in Chassidus, is that when the quality seemingly is inherently negative, you only use it within yourself against the force of negativity which draw you away from what you're trying to achieve. And then with others, you only use more humble and more generous qualities, kindness and charity, love, patience, right? All of these things. But when it comes to ourselves, there needs to be a level of cunning. There needs to be a level of going around the bend in order to get to my place. There has to be a level of inner strength, and like Rabbi Nachman says, holy chutzpah, which again, this concept of chutzpah that Rabbi Nachman is speaking about is not with others, it's within oneself. When a person learns Torah, Rabbi Nachman says, he acquires cunning, period. Anybody who learns Torah is going to learn real cunningness, okay? Now, the person, Rabbi Nachman says, who learns for the right reasons, he's going to use that cunning in order to overcome his lower self, his ego, his sense of negativity, the things which bring him away from Hashem, the things which draw him away from inner peace, from brotherhood and unity with others. That's what he's utilizing that cunning for within himself. Lavan, b'schut the fact that he is not learning in order to get closer to Hashem, or he's not learning in order to help another person, he's just learning in order that he should be able to disprove others or to naysay. So the cunning that he gets is also utilized only with others. And that's why he becomes so dangerous. And this is what Rabbi Nachman is drawing attention to. Yes, when you have enemies of the Jewish people, that they have no Torah knowledge, and yes, it's a danger. But by Rabbi Nachman, the biggest danger of all was people who were truly knowledgeable in the Torah, who did not do so for the right reasons. And this was the Baal Shem Tov's biggest concern as well. It was those people that Rabbi Nachman understood had this tremendous koach to lead other individuals, and they usually choose to do so. But if they're not doing so for the right reasons, that is selfless reasons completely, then as a result of that, those people who follow, those people who learn from those people, end up reflecting the ego. They end up reflecting the controversy. They end up reflecting the machloket, the strife, which the learner of the Torah himself is holding on to. And as a result of that, despite the fact that he's learning the same Torah, so to speak, as Yaakov, the Tzadik, he ends up he ends up hating the Tzadik. V'rodef et tzadikim, and he chases after real tzadikim. Who are these real tzadikim? Rabbi Nachman says the Tzadik Elyon and the Tzadik Tachton. Okay, so again, this needs some clarification. We see from Moshe Rabbeinu and Yoshua ben Nun, we see from Rabbi Nachman and Rav Natan, we see from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his students, we see from the Arizal and Rav Chaim Vital, we see from the Vilna Gaon and Rav Chaim Volozhin, we see from the Ramban and his student Rabbeinu Bachaya, we see over and over again Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we see over and over this concept of the higher tzaddik and the lower tzaddik. What does it mean, the upper tzaddik and the lower tzaddik? So Rabbi Nachman is going to explain in a minute, okay? So let's see. The tzaddik tachton and the tzaddik elyon, ki shechinta bein trein tzaddikaya yatva, because the Zohar says that the Shechina rests between the tzaddikim. Tzaddikaya yatva. So now Rabbi Nachman says, Kamosh, like it says also, tzaddikim yushoretz, in the 37th parak of Tehillim, it says tzaddikim shall inherit the land. So Rabbi Nachman said tzaddikim daika, not the tzaddik. The Shechina is not with the tzaddik. The Shechina is with tzaddikim. Trei mashma. This language is implying two tzaddikim. That where is the Shechina? The Zohar is saying it's resting between two tzaddikim. And this is what is implied by the Pasuk in Tehillim that says that the earth shall be inherited by these two tzaddikim. So what is the earth? The earth in Kabbalah and Chassidut is always referring to the Shechina, the female dimension of godliness. Just like Adama is a female word, the ground, and just like the ground, like a womb, takes that which is above it, let's say seed, we're going to call it water or actual physical seed, and then utilizes these upper forces to give birth to a greater reality than was previously there, even though it doesn't create something of its own, it merely reveals that which is hidden. So too, this is the Shechina. The female dimension of God, so to speak, has no godliness of its own, but it reflects godliness and gives birth to it, like the ground. Okay? Who inherits the land, meaning who inherits the Shechina? It's the tzaddikim. And the Zohar says, tzaddikim daika, two tzaddikim. Who are these two tzaddikim? Elu et tzaddik, shechidesh zot atorosh bapeh. Zet tzaddik elyon. This is the tzaddik that he creates navale and the Torah Shebal Peh. Okay? That means a person who becomes so expert in all facets of Pardes, Pshat, the simple understanding of the Torah, Remez, the hints of the Torah, Drush, exposition of the Torah, and so the secrets, the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, he becomes so bucky in all of it, written, oral Torah, everything, halacha. As a result of that, he actually is able to machadesh. He's able to create novelties in understanding of the Torah that never, so to speak, previously existed. And this is reserved for very few individuals. It's very difficult to do this, okay? However, there is one great tzaddik who is calling the tzaddik Elyon, Yaakov Avinu, that he learns for the right reasons. And in his learning for the right reasons and his complete devotion to Hashem and to the Jewish people, he ends up creating chidushim which give life to those around him. Novelties of understanding which break through barriers which were previously concealing us from pockets of godliness which could help us in different areas of our life. So this is the tzaddik elyon. So that's one of the two tzaddikim that the Shechina is with. The tzaddik tachton, and then there's a lower tzaddik. This tzaddik, he learns these chidushim from the upper tzaddik. And the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, is the Shechina itself. Like it says in Tikuni Zohar, Malchu Peh, Torah Sheba'al Peh Karinan La. That the mouth, the oral Torah, the Shechina are all one thing. The mouth is also like an Adamah. The mouth is also like the ground. It's also a wound, Rabbi Nachman says in Likutey Moharan. Because what happens in the mouth? You speak out truth. The truth exists only in potential. But once you start to speak it out, you can actualize that reality. This is the secret of Hipodadut. That you have all of these different potential powers within you, but they all remain concealed and hidden and bound up within a person until he speaks out his desires, until he speaks out his wisdom, until he speaks out his innermost ratzon. And by speaking it out, he gives birth to it. Why? Because the mouth is a proverbial womb. So too, the oral Torah is also considered like a womb. Why? Because the oral Torah is only a reflection of the written Torah. The written Torah was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. The written Torah is divine. It's from Hashem. The oral Torah was also given to Moshe, but the oral Torah was not given in its particulars to Moshe Rabbeinu. Only the basic exegetical principles, whatever that means, that I am able to now learn out new understandings from the Torah, those were given to Moshe, meaning the mitzvahs in their general principles. And then for the rest of history, the reason Hashem did this is that we would always have a living transmission of Torah, that there would always be the concept of a rabbi, a student, father and son, mother and daughter. There's always going to be a transmission of the oral Torah, which would be taking place. And this was not just to cultivate continuity, which obviously that does. And it's not only to create a living connection to Hashem, which we're going to see the secret in that. But part of it is because by nature, the only way for the Shechina to exist in the world, even though we're in exile, is through the mouth. Because the mouth has no light of its own, so it's able to live in the world when there's no light. But it reflects the light of the upper tzaddik. It reflects the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It reflects the light of Moshe Rabbeinu. That even when Moshe Rabbeinu died, Yoshua ben Nun was able to utilize and reflect that light that he got from Moshe and lead the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael to conquer all the enemies of the Jewish people, all 31 nations, and to destroy Amalek, right? Or to weaken them until the Mashiach comes. Yoshua, what was so special about him? He didn't make any novel explications in the Torah. He didn't draw out new understanding from the Torah. But that was his gift. He was the lower tzaddik. Because he was, so to speak, the moon to Moshe's son, Moshe made new novelay, new understandings of the Torah, new windows and avenues and paths into getting closer to Hashem. And Yoshua ben Nun studied those vociferously, with intensity, with fervor, with the right kavanah, with the right intentions. He only wanted to be close to Hashem. And as a result of that, he reflected the light of his Rebbe perfectly. And now Yoshua has a gift which even Moshe doesn't have. That is that because Moshe's light is so intense, since he's the one who's creating these chidushim themselves, sometimes the generation is not capable of receiving that light from Moshe. And then Rabbi Nachman explains that at times that person has to pass away. Moshe has to pass away. But all of this is also for the good. That is, that Yoshua ben Nun, who is the perfect vessel, receptacle, to be able to reflect that light, diminishing the light so it's not as intense without losing the foundations of what was given over. So he now becomes the primary cause of redemption for his people. Because they relate to him more. They can understand him more. So this is the upper and the lower tzaddik. This is the two concepts. And we see this now by Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Natan, right? What did Rabbi Natan do? He took all of Rabbi Nachman's chidushim, which were very novel, right? To the extent that Rabbi Shimon Morgenstern says that Rabbi Nachman's novelties of understanding in Torah reflect the highest revelation of Torah called the Keter of the Torah. And Rav Natan was very, very well versed in being the perfect keli for the or, right? Out of all of Rabbi Nachman's students, he had many different types of students. Some of them were brilliant in their own right. Some of them were able to do hisbodedus for hours and hours and hours on end, sometimes a full 24 hours at a time, right? Everybody had their own different avoda that they specialized in. Rav Natan was not exceptional in any of these in relation to the other Hasidim of Rabbi Nachman, the other disciples of Rabbi Nachman, and he was also the youngest. However, Rav Natan was the one who was able to take all of Rabbi Nachman's teachings and give it to us now in 2022 in a way that we can understand, that's going to actually bring the Geula for us personally and the redemption at large. How does Rav Natan do that? Because Rav Natan, the one area in which he exceeded his brothers in arms, the one area he exceeded the other disciples who were older than him and more superlative than him, was his level of bittul, his capability of completely emptying up his own cup so that he can receive the light of this upper tzaddik of Rabbi Nachman and then reflect it to his generation faithfully. And you need both. Right? This is the whole chiddush of the sixth Torah of the Likutey Moharan. Rabbi Nachman describes, again, this upper and lower tzaddik, Moshe and Yoshua, and how Hashem rests with them. Right? So that means that if you want to find Hashem, you need to find the upper tzaddik, these original insights that are coming from this great tzaddik like Yaakov Avinu who did it for the right reasons, and you need to find his faithful students, that they have nothing of their own. And as a result of that, they are capable of receiving the light of the sun and reflecting it like the moon to the stars around him. And that example or that paradigm is very bidiuk. It's very exact, and it's made to be that way. It's also the reason why King David is described as the moon, right? That the Mashiach is reflective of the moon, emunah, right? And Moshe Rabbeinu is reflective of Da'at. Rav Natan speaks about this all the time. That is knowing God, not believing in him, but actually experiencing him. And yet it's not Moshe who brings the redemption, it's David who does. Why? He doesn't have any light of his own, but that's his whole koach. His whole koach is that because David has no light of his own, he is able to give that light to his brothers in 2022. That's what the Shem. They're not capable of receiving the light of Moshe Rabbeinu. So as a result of that, he becomes the primary transmitter of that Torah. The lower tzaddik, right? He's the one who's capable of bringing the redemption like Yoshua ben Nun. And what is it that's between the upper tzaddik and the lower tzaddik? What is it that's between Rabbi Nachman and Rav Natan? It's called the oral Torah. The oral Torah itself is the Shechina. This is what Rabbi Nachman is expressing right now. And when the Shechina, which is known as the oral Torah, comes into the Talmid Chacham Ish Yehudi, the Jewish scholar demon who's learning for the wrong reasons, but in order for him to be called a Talmid Chacham, he needs to learn the oral Torah, meaning he also needs to be busy speaking over and internalizing the Shechina. However, because he's not doing it for the right reasons, he's not this empty vessel, which is receiving it only for Hashem's sake, only for the Jewish people's sake. So as a result of this, he actually takes, Rabbi Nachman says, he takes the Shechina into exile. He brings the Shechina into Galut. This is a very, very scary statement, because this is the first time that we've done so far since we started the first lesson of Likutey Moharan, that Rabbi Nachman says, Bedavka, that what causes the Shechina to go into exile is when people learn for the wrong reasons. It's a very, very deep thing. And if you look at the stories of Baal Shem Tov, you could see how busy he was trying to educate people on this matter. That this is the root cause of exile. And Rav Natan speaks about this all the time. That the Shechina in exile means that Hashem's Torah is with people who are not learning for the right reasons. And as a result of that, everything that comes out of them, which is more powerful because of the Torah itself, because the Torah is the light of God, so as a result of that, they end up receiving a malchut, a power of influence from this. But when they don't use it for the right reasons, they end up bringing everybody away from the truth with them. They bring everybody away from Hashem with them. The issue is that the disciples do not know of the Jewish scholar demon. They don't know that he has the wrong intentions. And as a result of that, they end up getting sucked up into this whole entire strife, which is all bound up within this person's unrectified lower self. And when that person who's coming to learn the Torah and then give it to others and is making his own chidushim, like Yaakov Avinu, and yet he has not rectified himself, so then he ends up becoming an enemy, specifically Rabbi Nachman says, of the upper and the lower tzaddik. He becomes an enemy of the person who originates the Torah, which is going to help his brethren get out of exile, and his faithful students who are doing nothing other except for trying to learn it as faithfully, as humbly, as genuinely and authentically as possible, only for the sake of those around them. And those innocent individuals who are doing it for the right reasons, they are the they are the target of oppression and opposition and strife. This whole thing is hinted to in a secret of Rabbi Nachman in Sefer Midot that he wrote when he was a child. It was codified by Rav Natan when Rabbi Nachman was in his early 30s, where he said there, a person should always advocate for the oppressed, right? Rabbi Nachman was the first world social worker. You should always advocate for the oppressed. Why should you advocate for the oppressed? Because the nature of the oppressed is that the truth is with them. Hashem is with them. Like Hashem says, I'm with them in that tzar. Like when Moshe Rabbeinu was by the burning bush. Why was the bush burning? The Midrash says to show that despite Moshe's own individual journey towards Hashem, which had a lot to do with pre-shoot separation from the physical world, had a lot to do with individual growth, had a lot to do with personal avoda, leaping and running to Hashem. Then when he finally wants to get the greatest revelation of God ever, Hashem then tells him, okay, you have to come all the way back down because I'm not up there. I'm with the Jewish people that are enslaved in Mitzrayim, that they're suffering at the hand of their oppressors. That's where I am. So this is a very, very deep thing to know. And also something to contemplate. That just because you have other people around you who are giving you tremendous trouble, tremendous obstacles and strife are against you when you're only trying to do the right thing, you should take this as chizuk. You should take this as strength, that I'm holding on to the truth. And that's why this is happening. Obviously, if you're doing something for the wrong reasons, or this is not spiritually related, and everyone around you is telling you you need help, then it doesn't necessarily mean that. But if you really are, you know that you're trying to do things for the right reasons, and you know that the teachings that you're learning are life-changing, you know that they're positive, you know that they're transformative for yourself and could be for those around you, and you're trying to learn them and give them to others, and you're getting tremendous flack for this. The flack that you're getting is a proof that you're getting the teachings of Yaakov. And the flack that you're getting is often coming from the students of Lavan. Okay? Now this is not for us to judge others. We're not supposed to be going around and calling out people like they're doing to you. But just to know, you have to go straight to the truth, no matter where it takes you. And if you're holding on to it, automatically in this world, which the Zohar calls Alma Deshikra, the world of lies, then the truth, like the Shechina, is in oppression. It's in exile. It's in the mouth of the Jewish scholar demon. But with the coming of the Mashiach, with the Geula, that it should be Bimra v'Yameinu, then, like Rav Natan says, the truth of the Breslover Hasidim, the beauty of the Breslover Hasidim, will be revealed. And that is that the whole time, there was nothing other than holding on to the Shechina. So Bezrat Hashem, it should be soon in our days. I hope everybody has a great night. And again, anyone who sees this video and wants to start the special Sipur Masiyot Chibur that we're starting this Motzi Shabbos in America this Sunday morning in Eretz Yisrael. We're going to be delving into the depths of Rabbi Nachman's deepest book that he ever wrote, that was published, that we still have. So please personal message me, email us at sionbreslev@gmail.com or rabbikalmus@gmail.com, and we'll include you either in the men's chabur or the women's chabur, depending on who you are. And I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a huge step of development for all of us personally, and Bezrat Hashem should bring the Geula that much closer. Everybody have a great night.